checking in with Mike Williams from the LA Chargers, and you're tuned in to Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. If this is your first time tuning in the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein. Hell of a weekend for the Los Angeles Chargers. Obviously, still riding the high of the Mekhi Becton signing in free agency. And by all means, free agency is not done, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just keep that in mind. It may seem like it's been going on for 84 years, but no. We are still in the thick of it with still eyes towards the NFL draft on April 24th. But today, Monday, March 17th, as Dan teased on the live show on Saturday, we have a special guest today. And as always, I will let Dan Wolkenstein do the talking from this moment forth. So Dan Wolkenstein, please let everybody know who the special guest is.
Friend of the show from Wide World of Sports, ESPN, Kris Rhim joins Chargers Unleashed, talking all things Week 1 free agency, where this Chargers team stand, what it looks like going to free agency, what the temperature of the Chargers fan base has been, and what kind of to expect moving forward, given what he has experienced with his experience with the Baltimore folks, Joe Horti, prior to coming to the Chargers. So lots of fun things to discover. Love connecting with Kris because he always brings something that you're not expecting, and he's always honest, which I think Chargers fans love. But Jake, before we get to that, two questions. First,
two questions.
Happy Monday. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
And can we talk about our friends?
We can talk about our friends. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for everything football. BetOnline is every stat, every matchup, every live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. You think you know your stuff? Get in our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every single week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of up to $200K. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino and get on a game of blackjack or poker or on with one of our 150 slot games. Head on over to the website today to get in on the action. BetOnline, the game starts here. See, that ad read would have been slower. I actually stumbled. I actually should have been whistled and brought back to the starting line for that one. That was a faux pas on my part.
I heard you take a breath, and I knew that.
I did. Again, eventually, I will train myself to get through that without taking an additional breath.
Okay, can I ask you one more question?
Surely.
Can we bring on Kris Rhim now?
You can bring on Kris Rhim now.
Okay, Kris Rhim joins us next on Chargers Unleashed. All right, happy Monday, Chargers fans. After a wild week 1 of free agency, friend of the show, Kris Rhim from ESPN, kind enough to join us to discuss all things Los Angeles Chargers free agency, draft, analysis, you name it. Kris, thanks again for hopping on. Happy Monday to you. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. Happy to be here. Good to see y'all.
Good to see you, man. It's been a wild last week, and let's just call it a few months. I think Chargers fans have been in their feelings. Probably folks on the beat, folks in the building have been in their feelings ever since that Houston loss. A lot of money to spend. We'll get to kind of all of the happenings and the transactions, but what's your kind of just overall sense of how week 1 of the free agent frenzy, quote unquote, went for the Chargers? Hits, misses, or things that maybe are still left to be desired?
I think it went as probably good as they expected. I think the plan coming into this free agency was to approach it the way they approached it, right? You know, I never really got the sense that they were going to give one of these top of the market deals. I mean, even when you talk to people in the building, but just what Joe Ortiz has said publicly since he's been here, it's the draft. We want to build a long-term sustainable team, a long-term sustainable winner. And I think this week went about as well. I think they were in the mix for a tight end. That's probably, one that they wanted to get that they didn't. But as far as everything else, I think it probably went the way they had hoped, minus Puna. So yeah, I would say so. It's kind of going according as good as they, I think, had planned it to.
Let's talk about the big signing that put a smile on every Chargers face last week. The big ticket himself, Mekhi Becton, signs a 2-year deal with the Chargers. As it relates to this idea, this building a bully type of mentality that Harbaugh wants to do, in terms as it relates to the offensive line, because that was such a glaring need after the Houston Texans game and what the Chargers needed to do to rebuild that interior. This is only step 1, but it's a big step in bringing in Mekhi Becton. Love to just get your idea as far as Mekhi kind of rebuilding his career, going from tackle to guard. what this means for the Chargers in terms of their mentality, especially with Najee Harris being now in the backfield. Is this just the next step to building that intricate Harbaugh offense that he's been wanting to do since he got here?
Yeah, for sure, man. I think it was, I wrote that it was probably the most important signing so far, in free agency. And yeah, I think Mekhi, he's a really impactful run blocker. We saw that last season. He just moving dudes and getting second level. Like, he Jeff Stoutland, the offensive line coach in Philadelphia, obviously did a great job with him, but he was already a great player, like he was a first round tackle. His first season was great. And then it was just injuries and he struggled and, he was trying to get in shape. And I think he found a good spot last season. He's, as a pass blocker, he's around average, maybe a little bit above average. But really in the run, like the running game, when these guys got here, Jim Harbaugh, Joe Ortiz, everybody is, we're going to pound the ball, we're going to dominate. And that didn't really happen. Like there wasn't really as effective as you would expect. And it's not for them not scheming things up. I think it was really, that issue in the middle as we saw, throughout the year. And then, JK was hurt for a stretch. So yeah, I think this is really another step, another piece, and they're going to continue to add to that group, I believe, through the draft and maybe still here, as we go through free agency. But yeah, this is getting to Harbaugh's tip of the spear dream.
Now, I want to kind of get your perspective because I do feel that you are uniquely qualified for answering kind of like the Horti's draft philosophy, comp pick formula, looking for surplus value. You covered the Ravens prior to the Chargers. And so it seems like, generally speaking, some of this fan base just refuses to listen to what Horti's and Harbaugh have said and have done historically. But has anything this free agency or in the last since they've been hired surprised you or maybe veered off of what you expected from what you saw back in Baltimore?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. Like, I think Baltimore fans used to be the fans that still follow me too. Sometimes they would reply to Chargers fans and say like, just wait until Thursday. Like, like this is the Baltimore way. Like Thursday they'll be active. I think Thursday or Friday they signed Mekhi or was that
Friday?
Friday. So
Friday night.
they were right on point. And so I don't think people were familiar with the Baltimore way of doing things or surprised by what happened. I'm definitely not surprised by what happened. Not only from knowing, and obviously Joe Ortiz is not Ozzy, or he's not,
Sure.
he's his own person, but that's where he grew up. It was almost 30 years, and it was an effective process, right? The Ravens are never really bad. Their down years, they'll go, might win 8 games or something. So it's a process that makes sure that your team's floor never dips to, abysmal. It makes you consistently competitive. And a part of that process is by ensuring that you're navigating free agency. I don't want to say cautiously, but just I guess smart, right? Like,
Responsibly, yeah.
responsibly. I don't know. I'm the journal, we're all journalists here, I guess, right? For getting using the money responsibly and really prioritizing building through the draft and building with your own guys, while also getting some players that you believe in that aren't too big of a risk. Like we are 3 years removed from that offseason where the Chargers were just spending, and that was a consequential offseason for all the wrong reasons. They got the players that they thought were great, and it just didn't work out. And then they were in cap hell, and now they're out of it. So I think I will say this: being a fan of a team is just hard. Like, you know what I mean? Like if you're a fan of a team, like you want your team to sign everybody. Like, like I grew up a fan. Like, you want your team to do that, right? So I don't. I'm not saying like the fans are dumb or like they shouldn't be mad or anything like that. Like I think you have a right to be like frustrated if you want, because you see all these names, people, Patriots throwing out money, like we all play Madden, we throw money around, like you just think you plug and play and it works. So I don't give the fans any slack for that. But I will say, I think if they like listen to because all the beat writers were pretty much saying the same thing, because we all are around the team, around the building. So I think people, if they actually listen to us now moving forward, they'll like be more prepared, but still be frustrated probably.
Being a sports fan is hard. Truer words may have never been spoken about anything. So thank you for that, Kris.
Well, being a Chargers fan is hard.
Particularly. That's what I should have said.
I wanted to run down some of the other free agent signings with you. And a couple of thoughts that I had on certain ones were not only made just for the betterment of the scheme fit, but from the standpoint that the Chargers could actually rely on it as a crutch from a coaching standpoint than anything else. And they were putting a lot of stock into that. But let me run through some of these names with you. Obviously, you bring back Mike Williams for your X receiver spot, familiarity with Justin Herbert. That's going to fill a big need that we thought DJ Chark was going to be in that role last year. It didn't really materialize to that. You mentioned the loss of Puna Ford, which was tough. You bring in Deshaun Hand and Naquan Jones to kind of have a 2-for-1 to fill that spot, along with bringing Tahir Tart back, which was definitely a must. You obviously brought Khalil Mack back to keep the edge room going for at least another season. And then the two interesting ones to me was the Benjamin St-Juste and the Dante Jackson. Now, I know just from there are still some holes from their game that people have talked about, witnessed, but in terms of how they fit Jesse Minter's defense from a zone perspective, it looks pretty good. And much like it was with Christian Fulton last year as a reclamation project to rebuild his future, Steve Klingscale just does such a great job with this secondary unit in general. Do you feel like those moves were strategic in that circumstance, bigger bodied corners, and they're kind of betting on coaching to win out again? I know that that's not a foolproof plan, but do you believe that that's where they're going with it?
Yeah, I think so. I also will say, like, they love Tarheeb and Cam, right? Like, on the outside, like they love those guys. So I would say that, yeah, it's that they believe that they can coach the guys up. They are definitely the physical traits of those guys are what stands out, right? They want guys that are big in that way. And both of these guys can play. I know St. Juice up and down last season, particularly. But yeah, I think that, like you're saying, it's a coaching thing. It's betting on the coaching, but it's also like we have two young guys that we really believe in. We have two guys who've been around, and we want them to compete. We want them to learn from each other. I think all four of those guys can play, right? And like you said, they got great DBs coach, and it's just going to make them great. Ortiz, I think his first press conference, he said, we're never going to not be in the market for corner. So, like he's always, it's going to be corners galore all the time, right? Like that's where they're looking. So yeah, I agree with your point. I'm sorry, I'm not answering it well, but I completely agree.
It's perfect.
I think it's the coaching part plus the people in the room.
So I guess kind of a 2-part follow-up, but they are high on those two corners, Tarheeb Still, Cam Hart, both outside or just generally?
Generally,
Okay.
Generally high. I mean, the defense is best with Derwin inside.
Sure.
And Derwin is best with him inside. I basically see Derwin as a nickel. With Elijah back, I see him as a nickel. So if they like those two guys a lot, at least I'm not saying that they're going to be starting, but those two guys are who they love them, So yeah, I think obviously nothing's set in stone, but the inside, obviously they're going to rotate. Derwin will play. Sometimes he'll play deep. But for the most part, he's going to be nickel. So
and I guess the second part of that is the name that kind of gets forgotten a lot. And I know that they were high on him as well. It's Dean Leonard. Yep. And he has the size, the traits. I know he was injured, big on special teams. Like, what is the role for him on this team? Because it kind of feels like it's a little unknown at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Dean, he's another guy that they like, and another guy that has the opportunity to. I think as long as Dean stays healthy, he's going to be out there, right? Like in some capacity, right? Whether it's special or out there, at corner. And when guys get hurt, he's always out there and does a good job when he's out there. So to project his role would be hard to do. I would say that I don't think he's like out of the chance of him not being there or something. I don't think that. At least from my perspective right now, because he's a guy they like, a guy that could play. But his role, I don't know. You have to compete, right? You signed two corners. You've got two rookies that they speak highly of. You know what I mean? Like I think right now he's looking like you have to compete.
I guess the last part of of the free agency stuff is so much is talked about, like this running game for Jim Harbaugh and for Greg Roman, and what it was or was not last year because of injury, interior offensive line, both, whatever. Najee Harris gets signed by the Chargers, and he totally seems like that durability, just horse for this Chargers team. That stalwart term that Jim Harbaugh uses all the time. I've never seen a fan base who has been so desperate for a running game, so adamant that a 4-time 1,000-yard running back is not it. So I guess I ask you, how do you foresee this running game look like with Najee, parentheses, plus whoever? Like, what will this look like compared to what we saw previously? Inserting also Mekhi Becton in there, plus maybe more.
Yeah, I think it'll look like a lot more space, right? Like that's probably what I would say firstly with Mekhi, right? I think with JK, there'll just be situations where he's getting the ball and he's getting blown up. And then yeah, that was a lot of times, a lot of situations where he's getting the ball and a lot of time he'd end up breaking a run, so it will look better than the success rate actually was, or like the running game actually was, and you still break a run, just, it still matters. But I guess with Najee, it's gonna look more like, JK was more, I'm gonna get here, get to my assignment. I'm supposed to run through, let's say the B. I'm gonna spin out of it, juke this guy, and then get 4 yards. Whereas Najee is probably the first tackle. He's always gonna break it, and then he's gonna chug along for 3 more yards, right? So that's how I would say it'll look. As far as not being as excited about Najee, it's another thing. Like, it's another part of being a fan. Like it's just like the certain names that people want or highlight aren't always the people that those in the building also love. Like, they played against Najee. They saw Najee twice a year in Baltimore for he's been in the league. Joe was there for 3 years, so he saw him twice a year, 3 years. Then they saw him last year. Najee iced the game against him last year. So it matters, like, who you see, like who you're, and I'm sure they watched Nick Chubb, and they chose Najee, right? So it'll look different. It's gonna look a lot more like physical and just hard, right? Like, I think the way JK moves is very light and elusive, whereas Najee is just like beating you up. It's a more physical. It's gonna be a more physical running game. A lot of broken tackles.
You're talking about free agency a second ago, and by no means is it over. But we're getting really close to just being all roads to the NFL draft. But there's a couple things that I wanted to discuss with you before we put the free agency subject behind us. Where do you see them possibly filling any more holes as it relates to the roster as it is previous or presently constructed, even with all the moves that they have brought in?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll follow up with a second one that I think a lot of people are expecting this move to happen. By all means, please, to the first question, where else do you see them making free agency moves?
Potentially another move on the line, maybe adding depth there, and then. Sorry, is that my bad? If that was
Someone's going quick.
Is that a Lambo that just drove by?
Somebody's car, man. Yeah. Whenever I'm on this, something's happened. Someone's doing work upstairs last time, but yeah, I would say free agency wise, the D line maybe potentially another move, and maybe tight end. There are, I guess it's free agency counts, but I know fans have been talking about this forever, but there's the whole Dallas Goedert thing that's available. So
Do you see it?
do I see them doing it? Nah, but you never know.
Nah.
Gotta pour some water on that one real quick.
No, I don't. But you never know. You never know. If
but why? But I think this is where your perspective helps, because
Yeah.
you know how this place operates.
Yeah,
Like, is
I
it
mean,
because of the contracts? Because of the age? Is it because of the draft capital? Like, what is
I
it?
think it's a combination of both, right? It's a 30-year-old tight end who's good, who you would have to pay that you're gonna have to pay him when he comes here, right? Or you would just lose him in free agency, which they might be willing to do, but you're giving up a draft pick for a staff that just hit on every draft pick, or that feels like that feels like we know what we're doing, like that I think they really value these picks. So it's like I could get somebody who 23, 24, the rookie deal, versus giving up a pick and potentially having to pay a 30-year-old tight end, which I don't even think they would do. So that's my kind of perspective on it, right? Like from that point of view.
The follow-up question I had was another move along the offensive line that people have been waiting for actually for a while, and that is Rashawn Slater contract extension. You see that getting done prior to the season?
Yeah, I would imagine so. It always just seemed like something to me that when Joe Ortiz speaks about it is like a foregone conclusion versus like we don't like Rashawn or something like that. Like when he talks about it, it's kind of like, yeah, like duh, like or or
Sure.
it's like, yeah, it's like
Sky
they're
is
not,
blue, water's
No
wet.
kidding.
Sean Slater.
He's only
Yeah.
one of the best players on our team.
yeah, like they're not going too deep into it. And the season he just had, right? With the space that they have. So I would my antennas would be up too if I was a fan. I would just be wondering like why isn't that done? But I do think it's gonna get done. And he'll be paid, handsomely.
I think some of the frustration for Chargers fans, and sometimes myself and Jake at times, when we take our Harbaugh, Horti's hat off and put just the fan hat back on and
Yeah.
think of all the weapons Justin hasn't had and all the weapons that other quarterbacks in his draft class have had and all that jazz. They go out, they bring in Mike Williams. So I guess maybe a two-part. How impactful is that Mike Williams signing, do you think, this year? And what are the major holes left from passing weapons that you can see them actually going for? Like, everyone wants to see a T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, but like that just might not be in the cards for this style of offense. Like, what can you foresee them actually doing for weapons for Justin?
I'll tell you this, that question like sounded exactly like a question I've answered on like Ravens podcast so many times. Like, is the exact, because Lamar, I mean, that's Lamar, right? It was
Until Zay.
until Zay. Yeah, until Zay. It was just Mark. And then there was no quarterback in his tier that was playing in a similar situation that he was playing in. And now Justin is in that situation. And I would say that they're going to draft. They're going to pick a receiver and hope that receiver pans out. In Baltimore, they could not draft a good receiver to save their lives until Zay in the first round. And I think they got Torrey Smith in the second round back in the day, or third round, who was great, obviously. But Zay was the first receiver in Ravens history to make the Pro Bowl this year. At receiver, like they've had a special teams person make like they were just bad. Like it's really
Wow.
it's bad.
I didn't realize that. Wow.
Yeah. So I'm telling people, look at the Ravens. Like this is what they're gonna build the line. They're gonna build the trenches both sides, build the defense, receiver. They're gonna swing in the draft. And
So the fact that they already got Ladd, like, we're cooking. It's like,
cooking. That's so non-great. Like I know Ravens fans like, man, how did they first time?
Damn.
First time. Yeah, man, I wouldn't be surprised if they get one. And with Mike is interesting because I think Mike is a good player. I think a lot of those deep balls, that's Mike's bread and butter. And
that's not.
I mean, man, I mean, man, I watched Mike. I got on the Chargers beat, week 3 of last season. So that was the Vikings game. I think the Vikings game was my first game covering them, or Tennessee was. So week 4 was the Vikings game. And that was a game where Mike tore his ACL.
Yeah.
In that game, he had like, I don't know what he
Killed
had,
it that game.
but he was just going crazy. Yeah. And I was like, yo, this is like, he is good. He's very good, man. And I know last season was last season. And guys, he's getting older, but I think Mike's good, and I think the relationships matter. And he has a good relationship with Justin, and I think he'll open the offense up. I think people should be excited about Mike being there for sure. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I think they're going to swing again for a receiver. I don't know if it's first round, but they're going to try.
So like the weapon, and I guess maybe this is more up your alley in terms of like archetype.
Yeah.
Like, what type of weapon do you think they'll swing for? Like, other than like,
right.
Like, is it going to be a Zay type? Is it going to
Right.
be like a T Higgins 6'4", 5 guy? Is it going to be a massive tight end? Like, where do you see them kind of narrowing their focus?
Yeah. So they don't really have as you can see, like they don't have necessarily a type in terms of I think the last regime had a type.
We know.
That, yeah, right.
Big body.
Big. You got to be big. You got to be jump high. All that, right?
Run slower.
Yeah. so I will say they don't have a type in terms of the just are you good, right? Like when I turn the tape on, do you get open? Can you block? Do you catch passes? Are you mean or are you nice? And that matters a lot too. But yeah, so weird way of answering the question, but they don't. It's not like they're going in there like some teams literally have. If they're drafting the edge, if they're drafting a receiver, you need to be this. Like you need to be 6'3", you need to be 201, right? They don't have that for receiver, as we can see. But yeah, I would say with the weapons thing with Justin, it's a fair point because if you compare him, where people have him in the NFL in terms of the hierarchy of quarterbacks, he's now at a spot where, on paper at least, it doesn't look like he's coming to the fight with the same weapons as everybody else, if that makes sense. Or like with the same on paper, right? Like it doesn't really compare to some of the.
He's bringing a knife to a gunfight.
Yes, pretty much, right? And I think, well, I guess Josh Allen might be comparable now, but other than that, right? It's dicey. So I think that's a fair point.
Looking forward to April 24th. And now, given the holes that the roster or that the Chargers have filled on the roster through free agency, has this team once again set themselves up where it's basically BPA virtually in any round that they could go to, depending on how the board falls to them? Because so many people would love to see Colson Loveland on this team to fill the tight end gap. You also still have a massive hole at center, and we're still building up that offensive line that you need to take care of. So people talk about Gray Zabel all the time, myself included.
We hope they think that it's still a hole in center.
But have they truly set themselves up that way? Because in one view, you could look at it to say, okay, lots of one-year deals could be just temporary Band-Aids because you still need to set yourself up for the long term at certain positions, i.e. edge, i.e. another wide receiver that you have under contract for a period of time. This offensive line needs a hell of a lot more consistency behind it rather than just bringing in veterans on short-term deals. So has this team just really set themselves up to where almost every round, depending on how the board goes to them, they could still just draft with that mentality and not so much with the need anymore?
Pretty much. I mean, besides quarterback, like you could just, I think that's exactly what they're going to do. Take the best, and regardless of where a person has played in college on the line, I think they're going to do a lot of work to see about, where people can you switch? Can you snap the ball? Right. So yeah, I think there's a lot. They literally what you said, right? They're going into it same way as like BPA, but I don't think they're in the, Shador sweepstakes or anything like that. That's the only thing I would say, or Cam Ward. That's probably it. But everything else, pretty much fair game.
Chris, how real is the Zion at center thing?
I'll say this, that Jim and Joe are super old school approaches to media in terms of like when they get at the podium, it's like I'm not saying they're misleading or anything like that, but they're never gonna tell you anything pretty much. Like you're not really like they don't see the value in being like this is what we're doing and I
giving you
that.
insight. Yeah,
at the podium. And I understand that because they're talking to us, but they're not talking to us. They're talking to the world, right? And they don't, last thing they want to do is let information get out or, how they think about things, right? Because Joe literally told us at the combine that it was realistic to have Joey on the roster at his cap hit, for example, right? So like, so I say that to say that I do think they're serious about Zion being an option at center if they don't find another option. I do, right? If that's what I would say as far as Zion goes.
Okay.
At guard or center, I should say, left guard or center. Yeah.
How would you feel if no other free agent move? We're going to see more moves because they still have money to spend. Like it's not going to end. But if the biggest moves they made were Khalil Mack, don't forget Elijah Molden, and then you've got Najee Harris and Mekhi Becton.
How would I feel about that?
Would this be a successful offseason? Or would you be like, dang, I thought they were going to go a little bit crazier?
I would say that I think it'd be a solid offseason, right? Like I think it's what I expected. I think success, when I would say success, is determined by like how the guys play. So I think on paper, to me, the biggest signing is Becton because of signing outside the team. The re-signing, I think the biggest signing is Elijah, because I think Elijah makes Derwin, because they can move him around more, and Elijah's good back there. But I think Mekhi is a good signing for Justin, for the running offense, for everyone involved. So I would say it's about what I expected, right? Like success, I don't know yet, right? Like I think, the Patriots spend a bunch of money, right? And that doesn't mean you're gonna be successful, right? Like so we gotta see how they play. So yeah, my bad. I'm not trying to dance around the question, but
No.
Yeah, that's really my take on it.
There was a certain wide receiver last week who teased, without trying to give too much away, but about putting the band back together and bringing a certain wide receiver that rhymes with Schmeen and Schmalin back to this team. I'm just asking you on your gut because of what we heard Mike say. Said he couldn't talk too much about it, dropped the hopefully behind it. What do you think? What's your gut tell you? Because if they're having talks, and as much as Mike and Keenan talk on a weekly basis, like put the odds to it. What do you think? Chances of a Keenan, Mike Williams, Justin Herbert reunion?
If I was a betting man, I would bet no. but I will say
How
this.
about no?
I will say this, that it does come down to like, what is Keenan's market and what are his options, and if he's willing to come here for a salary that he probably wouldn't expect, or probably wouldn't have thought he would have been making this offseason, right? So I think Keenan's still good. I think that Chicago, it was a weird situation, and it was what it was. I think he's still a good player, but I don't see that happening. But Mike and Keenan are super close. They're like best friends, so they talk every day, and obviously he wants to recruit him to come back. But I don't see it happening. But who knows? You never know. You never know. And you got to say, why did Mike say that? Why did Mike say, I don't want to,
Windy
So,
fingers.
that's what I'm
Windy
saying.
fingers.
That's what I'm saying. You don't know. He might know something.
A couple more here for you before we let you get out of here. Free agent wide receivers, they got one in Mike Williams. A bunch are gone. A bunch are paid a lot. I know a lot of folks are thinking DK, Devontae. Are there any other free agent receivers out there right now that you could see that this team would A, prioritize, and B, like from a contract perspective, make sense given the holes they have, whether that's a speed guy or maybe another X guy in case of injury? Like, is there anyone else that you are kind of double clicking on?
Not necessarily. Yeah, not necessarily. I don't think there's anyone in my mind that stands out like this is their kind of guy, or this is a guy that they would go after. But Simi not coming back did surprise me a little bit. He signed with the Cardinals. He's super close with Justin, for one. He obviously has in terms of just everything, like the no elevators thing to the just being a good player. and I think he showed that he was a good player, and obviously he got what he got. But so yeah, I don't think there's a guy who, I mean, maybe somebody like Elijah Moore. Is Elijah Moore is still out there?
Yeah, yes.
That's someone who they saw him a lot. Good player, but no, there's no one person where I'm like, this is who I think they're targeting.
Okay, last question for you.
Okay.
Well, actually, Jake, should we let him predict anything draft related, or should we just wait on that?
I mean, he's more than welcome to. I know we have a long road between now and April 24th.
Do you want to
predict? A lot
predict?
of things that still change in between now and then.
Yeah,
but I am always up
predict
for Chris's prediction if he wants to make it. So
predict who they pick.
Yeah, I mean, or at
Dan
least
always loves posing that question to the guests that we have, and basically call your shot. Who are they going to take? What do you think?
It could be a player or a position.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to pick a player, but I guess I'll pick a position. I mean, if I'm picking position, O-line. That's what I'm predicting. The tip of the spear.
Yep.
Tip of the spear.
I'm already bracing for it. Jake and I talk about like Gray's able, give me like some kind of interior offensive line guard. Like I know they're not gonna like it, but if I'm a betting man, like that's where I would probably put my money towards.
Yeah, man, get those pulling guard highlights or whatever, man. Whatever you
Start watching. Start watching. Get comfortable.
And then last question, and I think this is probably where most Chargers fans kind of put their minds when they get nervous or panicked or scared or whatever. But as it stands now, going into the draft versus as we stood last year going into the draft, is this team now, in your opinion, I don't want to say better, but more capable in doing what they want to do than they were a year ago? Because a lot of people are saying, "Oh, this team's worse than it was last year." Like, is that true?
Yeah. I don't think it's. I think they're worse than they were last year. I mean, Puna hurts for sure, but I think they're about the same right now. If I was looking at it, but I do think that Mekhi makes them a lot better. I think he really changes a lot for them offensively. Like it's, that was a real issue last year. Like running the ball was they couldn't do it effectively enough. They would have good games against particularly bad teams, but yeah. So I think offensively, that O-line is an exciting thing for the Jim Harbaugh experience and for the team. But I will say, yeah, they haven't done anything where you say, oh, they got so much better here or anything like that. They kind of seem like they're right around where they were last year.
We're talking to Kris Rhim. Dude, thanks so much for coming on here, man. I know you are busy. You've had a crazy week. I know you're from Philly originally. So were you excited when you saw the Chiefs get the break speed off of them?
Yeah, man. I guess a little part of me was, man. Yeah, I still happy for my friends. They were all on Broad Street. The game would have been. It was just like a boring game, but it was good though. Like I mean, for a bunch of people I know and the city. But yeah, I feel like if you're not an Eagles fan, that game was probably like, because I remember like it reminded me of the Broncos Seahawks Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like I fell asleep during that, and I was like,
or like the Bears Colts one too, same thing.
Yeah.
Fell asleep.
The
Broncos Seahawks Super Bowl.
If I wasn't of age and had a little bit in my system, I probably would have fell asleep too this time.
Jake and I were texting watching that Super Bowl, and we had people over at my house, and they're like, "Oh, come on, let's make this a game, make it more interesting. I hope Chiefs come back." I'm like, "No, absolutely not. I want this to go as bad as it could. Give me the most boring ass kicking I could possibly get." I was so happy.
Yeah. I will say there are a lot of people that felt that way too. That is true. Yeah.
Oh man, you can find Kris at ESPN as well as on X at Kris Rhim 1. Kris, what are you working on these days? What's something folks can expect from you?
Yeah, just a lot, man. A lot. It's too much. I don't want to give too much away, like Mike said.
Yeah, don't be like Mike.
But a lot's coming your way, a lot of stuff, man. Just keep following along, and hopefully I don't make y'all mad at any point too badly. So, just keep hanging on with me.
Kris is going to wear I'm sorry I was trapping hat here soon.
Oh my God.
Oh,
Yeah,
dude, Kris, thank you, man. Appreciate you as always, and look forward to having you on again. All right.
all right. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you,
See ya.
Kris.